Take a moment, not to listen, but to notice. Notice that you are here, listening, thinking, questioning. And ask yourself, quietly, honestly, how much of what you believe did you choose? Not what you inherited, not what you were taught, not what you absorbed without resistance, but what you examined. Most people want confidence. Few are willing to pass through doubt to earn it. And this is where real self-development begins. The comfort of borrowed beliefs. From the moment we're born, beliefs are handed to us like furniture in a house we never designed. This is right, that is wrong. This is success, that is failure. This is reality. And because these beliefs arrive early, quietly, repeatedly, we mistake them for truth. But here is a dangerous thought. A belief can feel familiar and still be false. Most people don't suffer because they lack intelligence. They suffer because they never question the foundation of their thinking. And mental wealth, real inner wealth, does not come from adding more ideas. It comes from removing unstable ones. Why doubt is not weakness. We are taught to fear doubt. Doubt is labeled as confusion, hesitation, lack of faith, lack of confidence. But deep philosophy and deep self-development teaches something radically different. Doubt is not the enemy of growth. Unexamined certainty is. Doubt is the moment your mind stops repeating and starts investigating. And this is where our journey truly begins. The radical decision to start over. Meditation 1, Reimagined. Imagine deciding just once in your life to question everything. Not emotionally, not angrily, but calmly, methodically. Not to destroy your mind, but to rebuild it on solid ground. This is the radical inner move that few people dare to make. Because questioning everything means facing an uncomfortable possibility. What if some of my strongest beliefs are wrong? Not partially wrong, completely wrong. This fear alone keeps millions mentally stuck. The first layer, sensory illusions. Think about your senses: sight, hearing, touch. They feel reliable until they aren't. A shadow looks like a figure. A sound feels threatening in the dark. A memory feels accurate until proven false. You already know this. So here's the uncomfortable question. If your senses can deceive you sometimes, how do you know when they are telling the truth? Most people never ask this. They build their identity, fears, and decisions on perception without questioning perception itself. The dream problem and why it matters for your life. Now let's go deeper. You've had dreams that felt real. In the dream, you were convinced, you felt emotions, you acted with certainty. Only after waking did you realize, I was wrong about everything. Now pause. How do you prove with absolute certainty that this moment is different? This question is not meant to scare you, it's meant to humble the mind, because humility is the doorway to clarity. Why this matters for self-development. Here's the connection most self-help content never makes. If your mind cannot clearly distinguish assumption from truth, habit from insight, conditioning from choice, then your confidence is just repetition with emotion. Real growth requires something rarer, the courage to suspend belief, to say, "I don't know yet." That sentence alone is a sign of mental maturity. The invisible enemy, mental autopilot. Most people live on mental autopilot. They think they are choosing, but they are reacting. They think they are reasoning, but they are remembering. They think they are awake, but they are repeating. And repetition feels safe. But safety is not the same as truth, and comfort is not the same as clarity. The extreme thought experiment, the deceiver. Now comes the most powerful mental exercise. Imagine, not emotionally, but logically, that there exists something that wants to deceive you. Not a monster, not a myth, but a force that benefits from confusion. A force that would gladly let you believe you are right when you're not. You are awake when you're dreaming. You are free when you are conditioned. This is not about fear, it's about discipline. Because once you accept that deception is possible, you stop being careless with belief. The turning point. At this stage, everything feels uncertain. The world, the body, the senses, even memory. And yet, something remains. Something undeniable. Something that cannot be erased even by total doubt. And this is where the second meditation begins. If everything can be questioned, if everything can be doubted, what is the one thing that remains when all certainty collapses? In the next part, we will uncover the foundation that survives absolute doubt. Not belief, not opinion, but something far more powerful. Stay with this thought.
The discovery of the thinking self. When everything falls apart, this remains. The moment after collapse. Imagine this moment. Every belief you trusted has been placed on hold. Not destroyed, but suspended. Your senses are unreliable. Your memories are questionable. Your assumptions are exposed. You are standing in a mental silence. And for most people, this is terrifying, because the mind is addicted to certainty, even false certainty. But this silence is not emptiness. It is space. And space is where clarity is born. When the mind tries to escape. At this stage, the mind does something interesting. It tries to escape itself. It says, "This is too abstract. This is going nowhere. Let's go back to something practical." But this urge to escape is not wisdom. It's discomfort. And growth never happens without discomfort. So instead of running, we go deeper. The question that changes everything. Ask yourself this. Not emotionally, but slowly. Is there anything that remains true even if everything else is false? Not something useful, not something comforting, something undeniable. Let the mind search. The trap of total denial. You might think, maybe nothing is real, maybe nothing exists. Who is thinking this thought? If nothing exists, then this doubt shouldn't exist either. Yet it does. And this is not philosophy for philosophy's sake. This is mental precision. Here is the insight that survives total doubt. If I am doubting, then something must be doing the doubting. Even deception requires a subject. Even illusion requires awareness. Even confusion requires consciousness. So no matter how deep the doubt goes, it cannot erase the one thing that doubts. The most stable foundation possible. Let's say this clearly. You do not exist because you have a body, You have a name, you have a history, you have achievements. All of that can be questioned, but this cannot. As long as you are thinking, you exist. Not as a role, not as an identity, but as awareness itself. This is not motivational, it's structural. Why this is massive for self-development? Most self-development starts with become a better version of yourself. But no one asks, who is the self you're trying to improve? If you build growth on an unclear identity, you build on sand. This realization flips the process. You don't create yourself first, you recognize yourself first. You are not what you experience. Think about this carefully. You experience thoughts, emotions, sensations, images, memories. But experiencing something is not the same as being it. You experience sadness, but you are not sadness. You experience fear, but you are not fear. You experience thoughts, but you are not the thoughts themselves. You are the one aware of them. This distinction alone can change a life. The end of identity confusion. Most inner suffering comes from one mistake, confusing the observer with the observed. When you think, I am anxious, I am broken, I am lost, you collapse awareness into content. But once you see yourself as the one who notices anxiety, the one who observes confusion, something shifts. Distance appears, and with distance comes choice. Thinking is not just logic. When we say thinking, we don't mean cold calculation. Thinking includes doubting, wondering, imagining, questioning, reflecting. Your existence is not proven by intelligence. It is proven by presence. You exist because something is aware right now. Even if your thoughts are chaotic, even if your emotions are heavy, even if your life feels unclear. Why this cannot be taken away? Let's push this to the extreme. Even if you lose everything, you are misunderstood, you are isolated, you are stripped of identity. As long as awareness remains, you remain. This is the deepest form of inner security. Not confidence, not optimism, but ontological stability. Mental wealth begins here. Mental wealth is not motivation, it is not optimism, it is not affirmations. Mental wealth is knowing what cannot be taken from you. And this awareness, this thinking presence, is unbreakable. Everything else can collapse. This remains. A subtle warning. Here's where many people misunderstand this insight. They turn it into ego. I am superior because I know this. That misses the point. This realization doesn't inflate you, it grounds you. It makes you quieter, more precise, less reactive, because you no longer need to defend illusions. Gentle integration pause. Take a breath. Notice something simple. You are aware of this moment. That's it. No labels, no effort, just awareness, aware of itself. This is not mystical, it's immediate. Now we face the next challenge. If you exist as a thinking being, where did this awareness come from? Is it self-created or dependent? What does this say about reality itself? In the next part, we go beyond the self and examine the origin of certainty.
Beyond the self. The search for a source of truth. When self-awareness is not enough, You now know something crucial. You exist, not because the world confirms you, but because awareness cannot deny itself. This is solid, unshakable. But here's the next challenge. Just because you exist, does that mean your thoughts are true? Awareness alone does not guarantee accuracy. You can be aware and mistaken, present and wrong. So the real question becomes, how do we move from existence to truth? The fragile nature of human judgment. Let's be honest. You've believed things deeply, only to realize later you were wrong. Not because you were stupid, but because being human includes limitation. You forget, you misinterpret, you rush conclusions. So here's a sobering insight. If your mind is finite and imperfect, can it be the final judge of truth? This question humbles even the smartest thinkers. Now we turn inward again, but more carefully. Look at your thoughts. Some ideas feel constructed, plans, imaginations, hypotheticals. Others feel triggered, sensory input, emotional reactions. But there's a third category. Ideas that feel larger than you, clearer than opinion, independent of desire. Ideas like truth, perfection, infinity, absolute goodness. Ask yourself, quietly, where did these ideas come from? You cannot give what you do not possess. Here's a simple but powerful principle. You cannot give what you do not possess. A cup cannot pour what it does not contain. A shadow cannot create light. So if your mind is limited, imperfect, finite, how does it generate the idea of the unlimited, the perfect, the infinite? This is not theology yet. This is logic. The idea that doesn't fit. Among all your thoughts, one stands out. The idea of perfection. Not relative perfection, not better than average, but absolute perfection. You don't need to be perfect to recognize it. In fact, your imperfections highlight it. You know what you are not. And strangely, you know what complete perfection would be. How? The inner signature of truth. Here's the subtle shift. Some ideas feel invented. Others feel discovered. The idea of perfection doesn't feel like imagination. It feels like recognition, as if the mind didn't create it, but encountered it. This matters because it suggests that truth may not begin in the mind. It may pass through it. Why this changes self-development entirely. Most self-development culture says, trust your mind. Deep philosophy says, understand your mind first. If your mind were the source of all truth, then confusion would be impossible. But confusion exists, which means the mind is a receiver, not the origin. And real growth begins when you stop worshiping your thoughts and start examining their source. The question of dependence. Now we face the uncomfortable question. Are you self-sufficient? Not financially, not socially, existentially. Did your awareness create itself? Did your capacity for truth emerge from nothing? Or is it dependent on something more fundamental? This question is not meant to diminish you. It is meant to place you correctly in reality. Dependence is not weakness. Modern culture glorifies independence, but dependence is not failure. A tree depends on soil. A wave depends on the ocean. Light depends on a source. Dependence simply reveals structure, and understanding structure is power. a reliable standard of truth. Here's the core issue. If truth depended only on your mind, truth would change with mood, memory, and bias. But truth feels stable. 2 plus 2 does not change because you're tired. Logic does not collapse because you're emotional. So truth seems to belong to something beyond individual minds. Something consistent, something reliable, something not subject to confusion. Why this matters for your inner life. Without a stable reference point, growth becomes trial and error. Confidence becomes fragile. Meaning becomes optional. But with a stable foundation, learning becomes grounded. Doubt becomes productive. Identity becomes anchored. You stop asking, "What do I feel today?" and start asking, "What is actually true?" The quiet realization. At this stage, something subtle happens. You stop trying to control reality and start aligning with it. You don't force certainty, you discover it. You don't inflate the ego, you place it. And strangely, this makes you calmer. Integration pause. Sit with this. You exist. You think, but your thinking points beyond itself. Truth is not invented, it is approached. And the closer you move towards it, the less noisy the mind becomes. Closing transition. In the next part, we face a difficult tension. How is it that if truth exists beyond us, why do we still fall into error? Why do intelligent minds misjudge? Why do sincere people believe false things? The answer reveals one of the most important insights for mental discipline.
Error, freedom, and the discipline of the mind. Why intelligent people still make mistakes. The paradox of human error. You now understand something profound. Truth is stable. Reality has structure. Your awareness points beyond itself. And yet, you still make mistakes. Not occasionally, regularly. Even when you are sincere, even when you are intelligent, even when you are trying your best. So the question is unavoidable. If truth exists and the mind can recognize it, why do we still get things wrong? The hidden split inside the mind. The mistake most people make is treating the mind as one thing. But it's not. There are two distinct powers at work. One, understanding, the ability to perceive ideas. Two, will, the ability to choose, affirm, or reject. Understanding shows, will decides. And here's the critical insight. Error does not come from understanding. Error comes from the will moving too fast. Why this is life-changing. Let this sink in. You don't make mistakes because you're incapable of truth. You make mistakes because you decide before you see clearly. This reframes failure completely. The problem is not lack of intelligence, it is restraint. Understanding is limited, and that's okay. Your understanding is finite. You don't see everything at once. You don't grasp all consequences. You don't have full information, and that's normal. But limitation is not error. Error begins when the will ignores limitation. The will is a powerful but dangerous tool. Your will is expansive. You can believe quickly, decide instantly, commit emotionally. The will does not wait for clarity. And when it outruns understanding, mistakes happen. This is not a moral failure. It's a structural one. The moment error is born. Error is born in this exact moment. When you affirm something you do not clearly understand. Not because you are evil, not because you are weak, but because the will says, "I want certainty now." This impatience is the root of mental suffering. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Here's a radical idea. True freedom is not unlimited choice. True freedom is disciplined choice. Freedom is the ability to withhold judgment, to say, I don't know yet, and that's okay. Most people confuse freedom with expression. Deep thinkers understand freedom as precision. The power of suspension. Suspending judgment is not indecision, it is strength. It means you respect truth, you respect your limits, you refuse to pretend. This single habit can transform decision-making, relationships, self-trust. Why does the mind rush? Why does the will rush? Because uncertainty feels threatening. The mind would rather be wrong than suspended. Certainty, even false certainty, feels like control. But control is not clarity. Mental discipline is emotional maturity. Discipline is not suppression, it is alignment. You allow your understanding to lead and your will to follow, not the other way around. This is maturity. A simple rule for mental wealth. Here is a rule worth remembering. Only affirm what you see clearly. Everything else, observe, question, wait. This rule alone protects you from manipulation, self-deception, regret. Applying this to daily life. Think about arguments, assumptions, snap decisions, emotional reactions. How often do you decide before understanding? How often do you defend before examining? Most conflict lives there. Error is a teacher if you let it be. Error is not shameful, it's informative. It shows you where the will ignored clarity. And awareness of this pattern is liberation. The quiet strength of humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking accurately about yourself. You are capable of truth, and you are capable of error. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Integration pause. Pause here. Notice any recent decision where the will rushed ahead of understanding. No judgment, just awareness. That awareness is growth. Closing transition. Now we arrive at a powerful realization. If disciplined thinking leads to clarity, what happens when we apply it to reality itself? In the next part, we explore the nature of reality and why the physical world is not as simple as it seems.
Reality, matter, and the illusion of solidity. Why the physical world is not what you think. The world feels solid, but is it? Look around you. A wall, a table, your body. Everything feels solid, stable, certain. And because it feels that way, we assume it is that way. But philosophy begins where assumption ends. So we ask, calmly, what do you actually know about the physical world? Sensation is not reality. You never experience the world directly. You experience colors, textures, sounds, pressure. All of these happen inside consciousness. The world you think is out there is filtered through perception. This doesn't make it fake, but it does make it mediated. And mediation changes everything. The mind's translation system. Think of perception as translation. Reality sends signals. Your senses translate them. Your mind interprets them. At no point do you touch raw reality. You touch interpretation. This is not skepticism for fun. This is accuracy. Why this matters for your life. If your experience of the world is filtered, then fear can be exaggerated, safety can be misread, threat can be imagined. Most suffering does not come from reality itself. It comes from interpretation mistaken as fact. Now let's go closer. Your body feels like you. But notice something subtle. You are aware of your body. You notice sensations. You observe pain. You feel movement. Which means, structurally, the body is something you experience, not something you are. This does not deny the body. It clarifies your relationship to it. Why this insight is liberating. If you believe you are the body, aging becomes terrifying. Illness becomes identity. Death becomes absolute annihilation. But if you recognize the body as an object of awareness, something softens. You still care, but you're no longer trapped. Matter without meaning. Here's another key insight. Matter by itself has no meaning. Atoms don't care. Physics doesn't judge. Biology doesn't assign purpose. Meaning appears only when awareness is present. This means meaning is not in objects. It arises in consciousness. The mistake of externalizing meaning. Most people search for meaning outside themselves, in possessions, status, approval, achievement. But objects don't contain meaning. They borrow it. And when the object disappears, the meaning collapses. This is why external success often feels empty. The world as extended, not intelligent. The physical world has extension, size, shape, movement, but it does not think. It does not reflect. It does not know itself. Only awareness does that. This distinction is crucial, because confusing matter with mind leads to deep confusion about identity. Why you are not a machine. If you were only physical, thoughts would have weight, ideas would have location, truth would decay like flesh. But thoughts don't rot, ideas don't age, truth doesn't rust. Your inner life obeys different rules. The quiet hierarchy of reality. This leads to a hierarchy most people never notice. 1. Physical objects exist. 2. Sensations interpret objects. 3. Awareness observes sensations. Awareness sits at the top, not as ruler, but as condition. Without awareness, nothing is known. Why this changes fear? Most fear comes from identifying with the lowest level. When your identity is tied to the body, possessions, circumstances, fear becomes constant. But when identity shifts towards awareness, fear loses its grip. Not instantly, but structurally. Integration pause. Notice something right now. You are aware of the room, aware of your body, aware of this voice. That awareness is untouched by objects, noise, or change. Everything appears in it. The trap of material certainty. The physical world feels reliable because it repeats.
Mental wealth and inner alignment. How clear thinking becomes a way of living. When understanding is not enough. Up to this point, something has changed. You see more clearly. You question more deeply. You recognize awareness as fundamental. But clarity alone does not transform a life. Many people understand profound ideas and still live in inner conflict. Why? Because understanding and alignment are not the same thing. The gap between seeing and living. You can see what is true and still act against it. You can recognize awareness and still identify with fear. You can understand discipline and still rush into judgment. This gap is where most suffering survives. Not because truth is hidden, but because life is not yet aligned with it. What alignment actually means? Alignment is not perfection. It does not mean you never feel emotion, you never doubt, you never struggle. Alignment means your inner structure is coherent. Your thoughts do not fight your values. Your actions do not betray your understanding. Your attention is not scattered in opposite directions. The cost of inner fragmentation. Most people live fragmented lives. One part of them knows better. Another part reacts automatically. Another part seeks approval. This creates chronic tension, mental fatigue, quiet dissatisfaction. You feel busy but not fulfilled, active but not grounded. This is not a motivation problem, it's an alignment problem. Awareness without order is incomplete. Awareness shows you reality, but order allows you to live inside it. Without order, awareness becomes passive, insight becomes intellectual, growth becomes theoretical. Order is what turns seeing into being. The inner hierarchy revisited. Remember the structure we uncovered? Sensations arise, thoughts interpret, will chooses, awareness observes. Alignment happens when the will follows clarity and clarity follows awareness. Not emotions leading choices, not habits leading decisions, but awareness setting the tone. Why discipline is not restriction. Discipline is often misunderstood. People think discipline means control, rigidity, suppression. True discipline is respect for clarity. It means I will not act until I see clearly. This is not weakness, it is precision. Mental wealth is internal stability. Mental wealth is not excitement. It is not constant positivity. Mental wealth is stability under pressure, clarity under uncertainty, presence under change. A wealthy mind does not rush. It does not panic. It observes, then acts. Living without inner noise. Inner noise comes from contradiction. When you want two opposing things, you believe what you doubt, you act against what you know, noise increases. Alignment quiets the mind not by force, but by removing contradiction. Simplicity as a natural result. As alignment grows, life simplifies, not because life becomes easy, but because unnecessary conflict disappears. You stop over-explaining, over-defending, over-reacting. You choose fewer things, but you choose them fully. Decision-making from clarity. Aligned decisions feel different. They are calm, grounded, unhurried. Even difficult decisions carry less anxiety because you trust the process that led to them. Responsibility without guilt. Alignment introduces a new form of responsibility, not guilt, not self-blame, but ownership. You see clearly where choices originate, and this clarity is empowering. Integration pause. Right now, ask yourself, not emotionally, but honestly, where in my life do I already see clearly, but haven't yet aligned my actions? Don't judge the answer. Recognition is the beginning of order. The subtle shift.
At this stage, something important happens. You stop trying to fix yourself and start organizing yourself. Nothing new is added. Nothing is forced. What was scattered comes together. Why this part matters so much. Without this step, awareness stays abstract, philosophy stays distant, growth stays incomplete. This is the moment where thinking becomes living, clarity becomes character, understanding becomes direction. Transition forward. Now that alignment is possible, a new question appears. How do you maintain clarity in the middle of emotional storms, pressure, and noise? This is not theoretical. This is daily life, and this is exactly where the next parts take us.
Living as the observer. How to stay clear while the mind is loud. The turning point of the journey. Up to now, you have learned how the mind works. You understand awareness, error, discipline, reality, alignment. But now comes the real test. Not in silence, not in isolation, but inside life itself. Because clarity is easy when nothing challenges it. The question is, can you remain clear while the mind is loud? The observer is not a technique. It is not something you do. It is something you recognize and remain as. The observer is not created. It was always there, before thought, during thought, after thought. Most people don't lack awareness, they abandon it. The mind loves identification. The mind constantly pulls awareness into content. A thought appears, you become the thought. An emotion arises, you become the emotion. A story forms, you become the story. And the moment awareness collapses into content, you lose perspective. Not because the thought is strong, but because attention fused with it. Observation without resistance. Here is a critical correction. Living as the observer does not mean pushing thoughts away. Resistance strengthens identification. What you fight, you feed. Observation is neutral. You allow the thought to exist without entering it. This alone weakens its grip. Thoughts as weather. Imagine the mind as a sky. Thoughts are weather. Clouds appear, storms pass, silence returns. The sky does not argue with clouds. It does not chase them away. It allows and remains unchanged. This is not poetry. This is structure. Emotional storms and awareness. Strong emotions test this practice. Fear, anger, grief, desire. Here is the mistake most people make. They try to analyze emotion while inside it. But analysis belongs to clarity. Emotion belongs to experience. The observer neither suppresses nor indulges. It witnesses. The moment freedom appears. Freedom does not appear when emotion disappears. Freedom appears when identification dissolves. You may still feel anger, but you are no longer inside anger. You are aware of anger. This creates space, and space changes everything. The space that ends reactivity. Between trigger and response, feeling and action, thought and belief, there is a gap. Most people don't see it. The observer is that gap, and inside that gap, choice becomes possible. Why most people feel powerless? Powerlessness comes from fusion. When awareness fuses with fear into panic, judgment into defensiveness, desire into compulsion.
There is no room to choose. Living as the observer restores that room. Awareness is not cold detachment. This is a common misunderstanding. Observation is not indifference. You still care, you still feel, you still engage, but you are not consumed. Like a surgeon with steady hands, not because they lack feeling, but because clarity guides movement. Everyday examples of the observer. Think about moments like someone criticizes you, a plan falls apart, you feel rejected, you feel rushed. In those moments, the observer notices a reaction is arising. That single recognition interrupts the pattern, not always instantly, but structurally. The ego fears observation. Why? Because the ego survives on unconsciousness. It needs you to react quickly, to identify instantly, to defend automatically. Observation slows everything down, and slowness dissolves illusion. You are not losing yourself. Many fear that observing means losing passion or identity. The opposite is true. You lose confusion, not self. You lose compulsion, not depth. You gain presence. Presence is quiet power. Presence does not announce itself. It doesn't need to prove anything. It listens more than it speaks. It pauses more than it reacts. It chooses more than it defends. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. Practicing without forcing. You don't need constant vigilance. Just remember often enough to step back, to notice a thought is happening, an emotion is moving, a reaction is forming. That noticing is the observer. Failure is part of the process. You will forget, you will identify, you will react. That's not failure. The moment you notice you forgot, awareness is already back. No correction needed, no punishment, no drama. The observer in decision-making. When awareness leads, decisions slow down, impulses weaken, clarity increases. You don't choose faster, you choose cleaner, and cleaner choices compound over time. Integration pause. Right now, notice this. You are aware of these words, aware of the body, aware of the mind. That awareness is effortless. That is what you live as. The quiet shift in identity. At some point, something changes. You stop saying, "I need to observe," and start realizing, "I already am." Thoughts come and go, life moves, challenges appear, and awareness remains. Why is this a major milestone? This is where philosophy becomes embodiment. Not ideas about awareness, but awareness living through you. This is mental wealth in action. Transition forward. Once you live as the observer, another question appears. If I am not my thoughts, emotions, or roles, then who am I really when everything falls away? That question takes us directly to the next part.
Identity without illusion. Who you are when roles fall away. The question most people avoid. At some point in life, usually in silence, loss, or exhaustion, this question appears. Who am I, really? Not what you do, not what you achieved, not how you are seen, but who you are when all of that is gone. Most people run from this question because roles feel safer than truth. Roles give structure, a profession, a family position, a social identity. They organize life, but they are not permanent. They can be lost, they can change, they can collapse overnight.
And when identity is built on what can disappear, anxiety becomes constant. The silent panic beneath achievement. Many high achievers feel a quiet fear. If I stop performing, will I still exist? This fear doesn't come from weakness. It comes from misplaced identity. You confused function with being. Identity is not what you can lose. Here's a simple test. If it can be taken away, it cannot be you. Your job can be lost. Your reputation can change. Your body will age. But the one aware of all this has not disappeared. Awareness does not need definition. Notice something subtle. Everything that can be defined appears to awareness, but awareness itself does not appear. It does not have edges. It does not have labels. It does not compete. It simply is. This is why identity collapses when you try to define it. This is not confusion. This is precision. The relief of not needing an image. When identity loosens, something relaxes. You no longer need to defend a story, maintain an image, prove consistency. You can change your mind. You can grow. You can admit uncertainty. And none of that threatens who you are. Relationships without identity armor. When you stop protecting an identity, you listen more honestly. You react less defensively. You connect more deeply. Because there is nothing to protect, just presence meeting presence. Identity and suffering. Most suffering is identity-based. I am not enough. I am failing. I am behind. These are not facts. They are stories attached to roles. When identity dissolves, the story loses its grip. Pain may remain. Suffering decreases. You are not becoming someone else. This is important. You are not erasing personality. You are not becoming passive. You are not disappearing. You are uncovering what was always stable. Personality continues. Preferences remain. Life unfolds. But it no longer defines you. The paradox of authenticity. True authenticity does not mean express everything. It means be without pretense. You speak when it's true. You stay silent when it's honest. You act when it's aligned. No performance required. Identity and freedom. When identity is not tied to outcome, failure loses its sting. Success loses its grip. Comparison loses its power. You participate fully, without being consumed. This is freedom without withdrawal. Integration pause. Ask yourself gently, if no one expected anything from me, who would I be in this moment? Don't answer with words. Notice the presence that remains. The quiet confidence that emerges. This kind of identity creates calm confidence, natural boundaries, emotional stability. Not because you built it, but because you stopped mistaking something else for you. Why this part matters so much. Without this step, observation stays partial, alignment stays fragile, life remains role-driven. This is where awareness becomes identity. Identity becomes flexible. Flexibility becomes strength. Transition forward. Now one final tension remains. Even when identity loosens, life still moves through time. Aging, change, loss, death. How does awareness meet time without fear or denial? That question opens the next part.
Mental wealth and the long view. Time, death, and perspective. Why time feels like an enemy. Most people don't experience time as flow. They experience it as pressure. Deadlines, aging, regret, fear of missing out. Time feels like something chasing you. But here is the quiet truth. Time itself does nothing. Your relationship to time does. The identity-time connection. Time only hurts when identity is narrow. When you believe, I am my productivity, I am my youth, I am my timeline, every passing moment feels like loss. But awareness does not age, only forms do. Psychological time versus clock time. There are two kinds of time. Clock time, neutral, measurable, practical. Psychological time, memory, anticipation, regret, anxiety. Most suffering happens in psychological time, not in reality. Memory is not the past. Memory is a present experience about the past. Regret exists now. Nostalgia exists now. Fear exists now. They are thoughts appearing in awareness, not time traveling. The illusion of running out of time. The feeling of running out of time is an identity panic. Awareness is never late. Presence is never behind. Only the story says, I should be further. That story dissolves under observation. Death without romanticism. This is not about denying death. Bodies end. Forms dissolve. Stories conclude. But fear intensifies when we confuse ending with erasure. Endings are changes of form, not proof of nothingness. Why awareness is not threatened. Death threatens what depends on form. Awareness does not appear as a form. It witnesses form. This is not belief, it is observation. What you are aware of can change. The awareness itself does not show signs of aging. Living fully without denial. When death is faced clearly, urgency becomes clean, meaning becomes simple, presence deepens. You don't rush because you're afraid. You act because life matters. The long view of mental wealth. Mental wealth means seeing beyond immediate pressure, acting from clarity, not panic, valuing depth over speed. You stop asking, how fast can I get there? And start asking, is this aligned with reality? Success revisited. From the long view, success is coherence. Failure is misalignment. Progress is clarity over time. This removes desperation. You still strive, but without self-violence. Aging without identity collapse. Aging becomes difficult only when identity resists change. But if identity is awareness, aging is movement, not loss. You gain perspective, depth, and precision, not just years. Grief and presence. Grief hurts. Presence does not erase it, but presence prevents suffering from becoming endless narrative. You feel fully, without drowning. Integration pause. Right now, notice the present moment. No future, no past. Just awareness experiencing this instant. That is always available. The freedom of the long view. When you live from the long view, you forgive more easily. You rush less. You choose better, because you're not negotiating with fear. Preparing for the final integration. One final question remains. How do you live daily life, relationships, work, challenges, from this clarity? Not occasionally, consistently.
The aligned life. Thinking clearly, living simply, being fully present. When everything comes together. At this point, something is different. Not dramatic, not loud,
but stable. You no longer chase clarity, you recognize it. You no longer fight confusion, you see through it. This is what alignment feels like. Alignment is not a mood. Alignment is not something you feel. Feelings change. Alignment is structure. It means your thinking respects reality. Your choices respect clarity. Your actions respect awareness, even when emotions fluctuate. Living without inner conflict. Most exhaustion comes from inner conflict, wanting one thing while knowing another is true, saying yes while feeling no. Alignment removes this friction, not by forcing honesty, but by making dishonesty uncomfortable. Simplicity as a result, not a goal. Aligned living simplifies life naturally. You stop overcommitting, over-explaining, overreacting, not because you're minimalistic, but because clarity doesn't need excess. Daily life as practice. This is not a philosophy you apply once. It's how you speak, listen, decide, pause. Each moment becomes a quiet check-in. Is this aligned? No drama, no self-judgment, just awareness guiding action. Work without self-betrayal. In aligned work, you act with precision, you rest without guilt, you say no when needed. Productivity becomes clean, effort without resentment. Relationships without strategy. Aligned relationships feel different. You don't manage impressions, you don't manipulate outcomes, you show up clearly. This attracts respect, trust, depth, even if it reduces quantity. Conflict without collapse. Conflict doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. You address issues without becoming the issue. You listen without losing yourself. This is emotional maturity in action. Discipline without harshness. Aligned discipline is gentle. It's not punishment, it's self-respect. You don't force habits, you support clarity. Decision-making revisited. Aligned decisions feel calm, carry responsibility, and reduce regret, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. The end of searching. At some point, the searching stops, not because you found the answer, but because you found the place you see from, and that place doesn't need improvement. The quiet joy of coherence. This is not excitement, it's coherence. Life feels internally consistent. What you think, what you say, what you do, they point in the same direction. Integration pause. Right now, ask yourself, what in my life already feels aligned? Let that expand naturally. No final claims. This path makes no promises. It doesn't sell certainty. It offers clarity, honesty, presence, and lets life unfold from there. The open ending. There is nothing to conclude, no identity to adopt, no doctrine to defend, just a way of living, quiet, precise, awake, and that is enough. The aligned life. Thinking clearly, living simply, being fully present. When everything comes together. At this point, something is different. Not dramatic, not loud, but stable. You no longer chase clarity, you recognize it. You no longer fight confusion, you see through it. This is what alignment feels like. Alignment is not a mood. Alignment is not something you feel. Feelings change. Alignment is structure. It means your thinking respects reality. Your choices respect clarity. Your actions respect awareness, even when emotions fluctuate. Living without inner conflict. Most exhaustion comes from inner conflict, wanting one thing while knowing another is true, saying yes while feeling no. Alignment removes this friction, not by forcing honesty, but by making dishonesty uncomfortable. Simplicity as a result, not a goal. Aligned living simplifies life naturally. You stop overcommitting, over-explaining, overreacting, not because you're minimalistic, but because clarity doesn't need excess. Daily life as practice. This is not a philosophy you apply once. It's how you speak, listen, decide, pause. Each moment becomes a quiet check-in. Is this aligned? No drama, no self-judgment, just awareness guiding action. Work without self-betrayal. In aligned work, you act with precision, you rest without guilt, you say no when needed. Productivity becomes clean, effort without resentment. Relationships without strategy. Aligned relationships feel different. You don't manage impressions, you don't manipulate outcomes, you show up clearly. This attracts respect, trust, depth, even if it reduces quantity. Conflict without collapse. Conflict doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. You address issues without becoming the issue. You listen without losing yourself. This is emotional maturity in action. Discipline without harshness. Aligned discipline is gentle. It's not punishment. It's self-respect. You don't force habits. You support clarity. Decision-making revisited. Aligned decisions feel calm, carry responsibility, and reduce regret, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. The end of searching. At some point, the searching stops, not because you found the answer, but because you found the place you see from, and that place doesn't need improvement. The quiet joy of coherence. This is not excitement, it's coherence. Life feels internally consistent. What you think, what you say, what you do, they point in the same direction. Integration pause. Right now, ask yourself, what in my life already feels aligned? Let that expand naturally. No final claims. This path makes no promises. It doesn't sell certainty. It offers clarity, honesty, presence, and lets life unfold from there. The open ending. There is nothing to conclude, no identity to adopt, no doctrine to defend, just a way of living, quiet, precise, awake, and that is enough.